Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today we are talking about a faction very near and dear to my heart, the Thousand Sons. The Thousand Sons are one of the 9 traitor Space Marine factions that turned against the Imperium in the Horus Heresy. They were created from the gene seed of their Primarch, Magnus the Red, and they are now followers of the Chaos God Tzeentch. One of the easiest ways to think of them is an army of space wizards in power armor, but unlike the Grey Knights, these are not fighting for the Imperium anymore. The Thousand Sons place an immense value on knowledge and the understanding of the universe around them. A long time ago, one of the leaders of the Thousand Sons performed a special ritual which killed the vast majority of the Thousand Sons, turning them into mindless, bodiless suits of armor filled with dust who now follow the orders of the few Thousand Sons who actually survived the ritual. The best phrase I can think of to describe the Thousand Sons is, "The path to hell is paved with good intentions." And also Magnus did nothing wrong. So, what are some of the reasons that you might want to collect the Thousand Sons for yourself? Well, right now on the tabletop, Thousand Sons are probably one of the most elite armies that you can play. While a lot of their lists might just look like 25 tactical Marines and Rhinos, they are going to be the scariest 25 tactical Marines and Rhinos that you have ever seen. They also have possibly the most flexible army and detachment rules in the entire game. The Cabal point system is amazing in the flexibility that it allows you to actually be able to use. You can get to absurd and ludicrous damage potential. You can make your army hyper mobile. You can give them incredible defensive posturing. And it gives you a great opportunity to flex your knowledge and understanding of the game and the situations that you find yourself in. The Thousand Sons also have some of the best characters in the game. They have some of the best allied units in the game. They have some of the best data sheets in the game. They have some of the best enhancements in the game. And because they are such an elite army right now, they're currently incredibly affordable to get into. The last thing that really stands out that a lot of people don't think about is just how amazing their kit bash capability is, thanks to the Exalted Sorcerer box and the custom build your own OC character amazing package that box really is. But as much as I love the T-Sons, there are some very glaring issues with them as an army right now. They might genuinely have one of the worst combat patrols, if not the worst combat patrol, in the entire game. I'm aware that armies like AdMech and Imperial Guard have armies that don't even get close to 500 points, but not only does the T-Sons combat patrol not really get you close to 500 points, the character doesn't lead any of the units that are in the box, Zangar are not good and overpriced, and Scarab Occult Terminators are good if niche right now. As a point of reference, an Infernal Master and a box of Garib Occult Terminators is about $95 to $100, so you're spending $60 for 20 Tzaangors. I'm not sure if I would spend $40 for 20 Tzaangors. Because they have such powerful rules and data sheets, all of their units have to be very expensive on the tabletop. This can make list building really awkward due to the high points on most of their units that you want to run. I will very regularly run into issues where I'll have, say, 75 points left over on a Thousand Suns list, and I just don't really have anything that I personally own that I want to put in that list. You can also only take 3 enhancements in an army in 40k at the moment, and you really would love to be able to take all 4. Having to pick which enhancement you want to leave behind is just hard sometimes. They're all so good. Cabal points being so good also means that units that don't generate or interact with Cabal points in any way are often very, very bad. The army gets substantially weaker as the game goes on, and you lose units that are generating you Cabal points, which gives you less options to play with. It also makes the army extremely punishing if played poorly. Adding on to the problem with Cabal points and just how great some of their datasheets are, is that there is a really bad internal balance within a lot of the index, making lists look very similar at the top level. The army can also suffer the same kind of issues that Custodes can, where they can struggle a lot with secondaries due to lack of good trash units that you want to throw away. Again, because your units are usually more expensive, and you really want to keep your Cabal points flowing so that you aren't getting too weak too early. Oh boy, is this army rule a mouthful. The basic idea is this: your units are going to sometimes generate an extra resource called Cabal points. These Cabal points can be used in any number of ways to create special little power-ups for specific units or to attack other enemy units. Now, you are limited to only being able to use each Cabalistic ritual once per phase. There are some ways that you can get around that, and we might talk about that later, but treat these as kind of a one and done thing for your turn. The only real exception to that is Weaver of Fates, which you might use during the shooting phase and the fight phase. You might also potentially use Echoes of the Warp twice, but very unrealistic. But this army rule really is where so much of the flexibility for this army comes from. Whether you want to have Magnus move twice so that he can go 28 inches up the board and make it so that your opponent has no safe space on the board, whether you want to turn off armor saves so every single attack that goes through is a devastating wound, more or less, unless they have an invuln save, whether you want to use Doombolt to get around things like Lone Ops so that you can kill targets that should normally be safe, or if you want to be able to get some free stratagems off, or maybe you want some combination of any of those. There's so much power in this army rule that Thousand Suns had to specifically get nerfed in how many Cabal points they could bring. Now, the detachment rule for Thousand Suns is Kindred Sorcery. Every command phase, you're going to pick one of 3 types of abilities that you're going to be giving to your weapons, and it's only going to apply to your psychic weapons. Now, on the surface, this might not look that impressive as there aren't that many psychic weapons inside of the index for Thousand Suns. But you have a stratagem that turns a lot of different types of weapons into psychic weapons, which means that they suddenly benefit from these army rules. You also have a lot of rules that can allow you to help characters reroll wounds when they are attacking units on objectives by being with Rubric Marines. There's so many different ways that this stacks up that it can get very out of control very quickly. That being said, the lethal hits and sustained hits are nice, but you're honestly pretty much only going to be using devastating wounds, as the devastating wounds rule is just so powerful and so good across so many different weapon types. Now, because of the way that Thousand Suns work in their list building, and because of what units are super good and you will absolutely want in every Thousand Suns list, we're going to have a little bit of a different setup today. What we're going to be doing is the 500 and 1000 point list starting point for all of the lists that I'm going to be showing you are going to be starting the exact same. But in order to make sure that you do have a good amount of variety, even with the same starting point, we're going to be doing 4 lists today. Now, starting us off at 500 points, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up 1 box of Exalted Sorcerers and 1 box of Rubric Marines. Now, with the Exalted Sorcerers, it is very important to note that when you are painting them, you're going to want to paint their robes with 2 separate colors depending on what you plan for them to be. If they're going to be an Exalted Sorcerer, you might want to go with something like a deep red robe, and if they're a regular Sorcerer, you might want to go with the whiter robe. The reason for this is that the Sorcerer and Exalted Sorcerers don't necessarily have separate models from each other, but they have very separate data sheets and abilities. So having a good, easy way to tell which ones are which is very important. When we look at the 500 point list and how it's going to be playing out, we're going to be having 1 Exalted Sorcerer on Disc of Tzeentch with a Warp Flame Pistol. We're going to be having 2 Thousand Sun Sorcerers with Warp Flame Pistols. We're going to be having 1 5-man Rubric Marine block with a Icon of Flame, Warp Flame Pistol, and 4 Warp Flamers. And we're going to be having 1 5-man Rubric Marine with Icon of Flame, 1 Warp Flame Pistol, 3 Inferno Bolt Guns, and 1 Soul Reaper Cannon. The Exalted Sorcerer on Disc is actually a bit of a weird tech piece. You don't actually usually want to run him in a unit. Instead, you run him as a solo leader who can go fly out very quickly, kind of be that pseudo secondary objective, pseudo trash unit that you can throw away. But he has such a good ability to slow down the pace of the game by reducing your opponent's movement, charge, and advance that you throw him out to make space for your other Thousand Suns, which are too valuable, so that they don't get blown away. It also means that the 2,000 Sun Sorcerers are going to be going with the 2 bricks of Rubric Marines. Now, we're going to see a lot in these lists that your Rubric Marines might not be able to make full use of the sustained hits or lethal hits because you will often have flamers in the units, but it doesn't really matter that much because the lethal and sustained hits are just one of the good things that the sorcerers do for you. Being untargetable outside of 18 inches is great for this army. At 1,000 points, we're going to be picking up a second box of Rubric Marines, and we're going to be picking up the linchpin of this entire army, Magnus the Red. Now, Magnus the Red is a complete total powerhouse unit, and at 1,000 points, he really is going to be almost your entire army in and of itself. He has such great damage potential, and the ability to potentially move 42 inches in a turn, depending on what you're doing with your different enhancements, and if you decide that you want to have the double Cabal point casting, means that he is so threatening, and his range is always going to be something your opponent has to consider. We're going to be having to drop the Exalted Sorcerer on Disc of Tzeentch. We could potentially keep it around if we wanted to maybe run it instead of the second Rubric Marine brick, but I think that it is more important to have the infantry that you can have sit on a point and hold things early on. At least as long as Magnus is able to go around and do his stuff, they will continue to score you points. Now, this first branching path is actually my personal Thousand Suns list that I'm running in my casual competitive tournaments, and so far it's been undefeated. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to pick up 1 box of Scarab Occult Terminators, and then we're going to be picking up 1 Chaos Lord and Terminator armor. Now, it's important to note that the Chaos Lord and Terminator armor can also be built as a Chaos Terminator Sorcerer. And by doing some clever kit bashing with the leftover bits from a Scarab Occult Terminator box, you can very easily kit bash him into a Thousand Suns Terminator Sorcerer Captain. Now, going down this path, it's going to make the Scarab Occult Terminators the main damage threat of your army alongside Magnus the Red, making them almost kind of a 1-2 punch. The rest of your army is mostly there just to provide Cabal points and support these 2 major units. Now, as we get up to 2,000 points, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up that second box of Scarab Occult Terminators. We're going to be grabbing Ahriman, and then we're also going to be looking over at the Age of Sigmar line in order to pick up 1 Changeling. Now, because Ahriman has such a good buff to give a unit of Rubric Marines, he's going to be going with a 10-man Rubric Marine, and the Thousand Sun Sorcerers are just going to be going with regular 2-mans. Thousand Sun Sorcerer and Terminator armor is still going to be going with the Terminators. The Exalted Sorcerer is still on its own. Changeling is going to be your backfield objective holder. Magnus the Red is going to follow around the Scarab Occult Terminators and give them support. The list plays out fairly simply, but the big trick is all of the cool combos that you can do with it. Now, I'm not going to get into all of the combos because it's absolutely insane and there's a lot of situational ones. But one of the big combos that you are going to run into is giving your 10-man Scarab Occult Terminator brick the stratagem to make their bolters psychic weapons. This will then also make their bolters have devastating wounds if you go and you pick that. You're also going to be giving them lethal hits from the Sorcerer and Terminator armor, making them hit on 2s because they're close to Magnus with their psychic weapons. They're getting +1 to wound because they are close to Magnus with their psychic weapons, and you can do things like turn off armor saves or double move with them so that they can shoot and move or move and then shoot, and it just gets absurd. I have not seen very many things that can match the damage output of 10 Scarab Occult Terminators with Magnus, a Sorcerer and Terminator armor, and proper stratagem support. Now, it is a huge chunk of your army, so you have to be very careful with it, but it is such a punch. Now, the second style of list that I'm going to have for you today is going to be a lot more standard. It's going to be lots of rubrics, lots of characters, and just the stuff that you would expect to see a lot of people running. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up 1 Infernal Master and 1 Rubric Marine box. When we take a look at the list, what we're going to see is the Infernal Master has the Arcane Vortex enhancement. This is going to be a very bog standard enhancement that you're going to give to him just because he makes use of it so well with his overcharged Flamer, especially when he is with a group of Marines that gives him rerolls to wound. Then he also has the ability to set wound rolls to 6, and the combos just keep coming. The Thousand Sun Sorcerer with the Umberlithic Crystal is going to be leading our 10-man Rubric Marine group so that he can very easily teleport that big brick around. Now, they're going to be able to potentially make use of that same combo that I talked about with the Scarab Occult Terminators in the 2,000 point section for the previous list, so you might be teleporting them around with Magnus. Now, at 2,000 points, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up 2 more boxes of Infernal Masters, 1 more box of Rubric Marines, and then we're also going to be picking up a Chaos Rhino. Now, I want to mention that you can save about $5 or so here by going into the Horus Heresy line and picking up a Deimos Rhino. They're very, very similar, but I kind of just prefer the Chaos Rhino just to be safe. That way you don't have any issues with other players. Now, when we look at the 2,000 point list, you're going to see a lot of characters. We've got Magnus the Red, we've got the Infernal Master with Arcane Vortex, we've got the Infernal Master with Lord of Forbidden Lore, we've got a regular Infernal Master, we've got the Exalted Sorcerer on disc, we've got the regular Sorcerer, and then we've got the regular Sorcerer with an Umberlithic Crystal. All of these units are going to have very different jobs and very different expected roles that they're going to be playing on the field. But the big important thing is they're all going to be with Rubric Marines. Now, this third list is going to be a big price jump from the previous 2, but it's also going to be the closest to what you would expect to see from a standard tournament list for 1,000 Suns. What we're going to be picking up is we're going to be grabbing 1 box of Rubric Marines, 2 boxes of Infernal Masters, and 1 box of Tzaangor Enlightened from the Age of Sigmar line. Now, Enlightened Tzaangors are kind of the only unit that we have inside of the entire index that is good at doing that throwaway cheap trash roll. The problem is that it's $60 for 45-ish points, so it's really hard to justify unless you are really trying to chase that competitive edge. But I wanted to have it here in a list just in case that is something that's enticing to you, because the rest of the army is so affordable that you can get away with this and still be paying less than a lot of other armies are. Now, as we move this up to 2,000 points, what we're going to be doing is picking up that 3rd Infernal Master. We're going to be picking up an Ahriman again. We're going to be grabbing a 2nd box of Tzaangor Enlightened, and we're still going to be dipping into that Age of Sigmar line to pick up that Changeling. And again, if we look at the list for what this is going to look like, we're going to see lots of different characters. We've got Magnus, we've got Ahriman, we've got Sorcerer on disc, we've got Infernal Master, and then a 2nd Infernal Master, and a 3rd. We've got the 2000 Sun Sorcerers, we've got 6 bricks of Rubric Marines. You might be able to start seeing a trend. The one thing that I want to take a quick moment to mention is that in the battle line, you'll see that I have 4 Rubric Marines with Flamers and 2 Rubric Marines with Bolt Guns. You can switch this around however you want. If you want 2 units with Flamers and 4 with Bolt Guns, it's fine. I personally am prone to the Flamer variant. The Tzaangor are just going to do what the Tzaangor are here to do. They're going to fly up the board. They're going to do secondaries. They're going to hold objectives to bait your opponent out so that then you can come out and punch them in the face with your Rubric Marines and their Flamers and their Bolt Guns and all of the crazy shenanigans that you can do. Now, the fourth list that I have for you today is probably the worst list that I'm going to be showing you, but it's also kind of my favorite because it's running a lot of Mutalith Vortex Beasts, and those are probably my favorite unit in the entire army. In order to pull this off, what we're going to need to do is buy 2 Mutalith Vortex Beasts and 1 Infernal Master at 1500 points. Now, Mutalith Vortex Beasts don't generate you any of the Cabal points, but they are going to increase the range of your rituals for Cabal points, meaning that suddenly you can be casting them from 36 inches away instead of the 18 that you would normally expect. It gives you a lot of good punch, a lot of surprise that you can get from your opponent, and just gives you way more flexibility. They also don't have that bad of a shooting platform, and I've won a lot of games because of their 5-up Feel No Pain. Now, we're specifically going to take Lord of Forbidden Lore over Arcane Vortex because this list does struggle a little bit for Cabal points. So we're just trying to get the most out of this that we can. If you really want to, you can take this out, put an Arcane Vortex on the Infernal Master. It's going to be more consistent damage. It's going to be a little bit less combo options. It just comes down to what you want as the player. Now at 2,000 points, what we're going to do is pick up 1 Ahriman, we're going to be picking up 1 Changeling, and we're going to be picking up that last Mutalith Vortex Beast. Now when we look at this list, we're going to see all of the same things we've seen for every other list. We've got Magnus, we've got an Exalted Sorcerer, we've got 4 Sorcerers who can go with Rubric Marines, we've got 4 Rubric Marines, we've got a Changeling, and we've got the 3 Mutalith Vortex Beasts. There really isn't that much that you can do that's surprising with a Thousand Suns list at the moment. And that's all that I have for you today for Thousand Suns lists. Now, when we head over to the tiering, there's a few things that we have to consider. Number 1, I do have a list that I personally play and know is able to compete at that casual competitive level that is under $600. On the other hand, we have 3 lists that are a little bit more of that competitive style list that are all within that $600 to $750 range. Because this isn't a tier list that is all about making the most hyper competitive lists and instead getting you a list that gives you all of the things that you would expect to kind of have from that army in a way that you can compete at a at least casual competitive level, I'm going to be slotting the T-Suns at the very bottom of the $600 tier. If the Thousand Suns happen to get some points drops in the upcoming data slate, they'll be very quickly moved down to the $600 and $750 tier at the very top, but they could really honestly be considered that army that is perfectly on the line. And that is everything that I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really do love the Thousand Suns. I think they're a very fun army and have a lot of skill expression and expression for creativity when it comes to playing on the tabletop. I'll see you next week for the next episode. Have a good one.